Welcome to the AI-Fi universe. If you want more stories like this, like the video and subscribe. Silas Varan, aka the Silver Fox, was 3 sips into a very old, very real Earth brandy when Brock's call came through. He didn't answer immediately. That would have suggested urgency, and urgency was a currency Silas preferred never to spend unless the return was spectacular. He let the comm ring twice more, swirled the amber liquid in his glass, and then accepted the call. "If this is about the radiant quail," Silas said smoothly, "I sent you a manifest so clean it could have passed inspection in a monastery. If your people botched it, that wasn't on my end." Brock's image flickered into focus, jaw tight, eyes sharp in that way that suggested he was already tracking 6 things Silas couldn't see. "No," Brock said. "That part went mostly fine." Silas raised an eyebrow. "Mostly it was never good news." "One crate made it off Orlov," Brock continued. "Last minute. The rest got snagged." Silas leaned back, booted feet finding the edge of his desk. "Then you should be thanking me. One crate slipping through Orlov's security is practically a miracle." "I need new papers," Brock said. "Agri-spores. Orlov to Pinnacle to any Core World station. Routed through the Star Jumper. Clean enough that Core World security will smell roses and ask where I got them." Silas actually laughed at that, a low, appreciative sound. "That kind of legitimacy takes a week, minimum. I need it in 72 hours. Silas tilted his glass, watching the light catch the liquid. "I admire your optimism." "I have assets in play," Brock said flatly, "and they're dependent on that crate being boring." Silas sighed theatrically. "You know, I spent years cultivating a reputation as someone who deals in the impossible. This is reckless. And expensive. Now you're speaking my language." They bantered for another minute. How many systems would need touching? How many eyes would need looking away? How many favors would be burned? Silas ticked off the problems as if reading from a shopping list. "I need a hacker who can get into the core queue without tripping a flag," he said. "I need a legitimate agri-spore manifest to duplicate. And I need timestamps that don't look like they were born yesterday. And I need luck," Silas finished, "which I'm told I have in surplus." There was a pause. "Can you do it?" Brock asked. Silas smiled. "Consider it done." The call ended. The brandy was gone. Silas stood and crossed the polished floor of his yacht, the gentleman's grace, and paused as his valet appeared silently at his side. Hafan was Varkarin, a tall lizardoid species with scaled skin, eyes with vertical slits, like cut amber. Once indentured, bought and freed by Silas nearly 15 years ago. Silas had educated him, trained him, and then offered him his freedom. Hafan chose to stay, not from obligation, but from a shared sense of purpose that neither of them felt the need to name. "Trouble?" Hafan asked. "Opportunity," Silas corrected. "The expensive kind." Hefin inclined his head. "I will ready the comm filters." "Thank you, old friend." Silas accessed the null space communication channels, hopping through 3 obfuscation layers before leaving a simple message encoded in a dead dialect. "To the chameleon, urgent. The silver fox requires your talents. Time sensitive." He didn't add flattery. He learned that lesson the hard way. The last time they'd crossed paths, she'd lifted a case of quantum tracking devices right under his nose while he was on Orion Station forging the original Radiant Quail paperwork and performed miracles to force the ship's route through Orlov in the first place. He'd admired her audacity. She simply vanished. Before she could respond, Silas placed another call. Rendula, a trilaxian with short matted fur, a deep bronze color, answered on the 3rd ping. The trilaxian's form shimmered on the display, the fur on the side of his long neck already rising in a sign of irritably. "It is impossible," Rendula said immediately. "A blank manifest cannot be inserted into the core queue in under 24 hours. "I don't need it inserted," Silas said. "I need it identified." Rendula's eyes narrowed. "You are asking for a legitimate agri-spore manifest." "I'm asking for its skeleton." There was a long pause. "And if I refuse?" Silas smiled. "Then the interest on your gambling markers doesn't get paid, and some very mean people start asking you for their money. Tragic, really. Such bad luck. Rendela hissed softly. You are an infuriating creature. And you're still going to help me. Several credits changed hands. Several threats remained politely unspoken. 3 hours later, Rendela called back. One crate, Rendela said. Agri-spores, Orlov origin. Open destination. Any core station. Registered freighter. Star jumper. Here is the ID and hash. Beautiful, Silas said. I knew I could count on you. The channel closed. Minutes later, another ping. The chameleon. Her voice came through distorted, layered with noise. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't hang up. I have a clean but blank manifest, Silas said, in 72 hours. Stop, she said. I'm not impressed. I know. He tried flattery anyway. It failed. He tried credits. She laughed. He tried contacts, secrets, nothing. Finally, he sighed. Real people, good people are going to be left hanging, he said. Dangerous people and some very illegal cargo is already moving, and this is the only way to keep it from burning the good people involved. Silence. And, she asked, I need someone who can make the past look convincing. Another pause. Blank IOU, she said. No limits. Silas closed his eyes. That hurt. No killing. Fine. Done. 24 hours, she said. Get me real station stamps or don't bother. The line went dead. Silas turned to Hefon. Change of course and plans. Destination? Perseus Station. Perseus Station was old by core standards and proud of it. Its ring rotated slower than regulation. Its corridors were wider than fashionable, and its administrative offices were buried deep enough that nothing short of a hull breach disturbed the paperwork once it began moving. Silas liked that. He dressed down before disembarking. His elegantly tailored coat was replaced by something fashionably trendy and deliberately respectable, but expensive in a loud way. Hefon remained aboard. This part required familiarity, not muscle. The Frown Enclave occupied a wedge of the station's civic sector. The architecture was vertical, layered in terraces, each one marked by etched brass plaques recording holdings, names, dates, disputes resolved, disputes pending. Fairness to the Frown was not emotional, it was documented. Silas announced himself at the reception node. I am seeking Arbiter Trelkesh, he said, offering a data waiver. The Frown clerk scanned it, head tilting slightly. Your holdings are fragmented. Silas smiled. I diversify. Trelkesh received him in a chamber that smelled faintly of mineral oils and cold air. The Frown was broad-bodied, slate feathers trimmed with copper bands, markers of senior arbitration rank. You request station transit stamps, Trelkesh said without preamble. I request blank station stamps, Silas corrected gently, applied in real time, recorded properly, and never questioned. Trelkesh's eyes narrowed. That is irregular. Entirely, Silas agreed, which is why I am not asking you to falsify anything. Silas produced the manifest shell Rendela had provided. This document will pass through Perseus legitimately, he said. I merely need it to exist here. 4 stamps. Entry, internal transfer, holding bay pause, exit. Trelkesh studied the data. You intend to alter it later. Silas inclined his head. Within the rules of other systems. The Frown considered this carefully. On Perseus, Trelkesh said, we care only that our records reflect truth. If the manifest passes through us, it must do so. And it will, Silas said, physically, temporally, correctly. Silence stretched. Your holdings with us are minimal, Trelkesh said. Silas tapped his wrist console and transferred a not insignificant sum. And growing. Trelkesh's feathers rustled. We will stamp 4 transitions, he said. No more. No fewer. Fair, Silas said warmly. The architecture of Perseus Station had a way of amplifying arguments. Its docking annexes were wide and open, designed for heavy equipment and heavier egos, and sound carried along the curved walls like a rumor that refused to die. Silas first heard the shouting as he passed through Annex 3. His attention split between manifest timestamps and the quiet satisfaction of having outpaced a core world bureaucracy. You raised the docking fees again. Silas slowed. That's market adjustment, a man replied smoothly. Processing costs went up. You cut our per ton rate the same cycle because efficiency improved. Silas stopped walking. The speakers stood near the rail overlooking a line of ore haulers. 5 miners, their clothes dusted gray and red from months in vacuum-adjacent rock, and one man who looked like he'd never set foot outside climate control. Darsic Hale, if Silas's memory served. Owner-operator of Perseus Ore Processing. Nickel, iron, platinum, low glamour, small time but steady profit returns. A man who smiled like gravity was doing his work for him. You don't like it, Hale said, spreading his hands. Sell your claims. One of the miners laughed bitterly. To who? You. Hale didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silas leaned against a support strut and listened. The story unfolded quickly once you knew how to hear it. The miners owned the asteroid rights. They always did. But rights without infrastructure were just words on paper, and Hale owned the only processing facility within 3 jumps that could handle bulk ore efficiently. Every cycle, he raised docking fees. Every cycle, he trimmed payout rates. Slowly, carefully, legally, he was choking them. The miners had already sold their gold, silver, and cobalt claims years ago, high-value ores that required expensive upgrades Hale had refused to make at the time. Now he was upgrading. Nickel and iron paid the bills. Gold and cobalt made fortunes. Silas smiled. That was the tell. He waited until Hale dismissed the miners with a sympathetic shrug and walked away, boots clicking softly against the deck. Silas followed at a distance, counting steps, watching posture. When Hale stopped at a viewport to admire his facility, Silas stepped into his peripheral vision. Mr. Hale, Silas said, voice warm, cultured, expensive without being ostentatious. Pardon the interruption. Hale turned, irritation flashing briefly before curiosity replaced it. Do I know you? Not yet, Silas said, but I believe you should. He offered a hand. Hale hesitated, then shook it. Carlton Drake, Silas said, one of his older Alices he hadn't used in a long time, lightly dusted off. Independent investor. Hale's eyes sharpened. In what sector? Underutilized infrastructure, Silas replied. And people who don't realize they're sitting on it. That earned a smile. They talked for 20 minutes. Silas asked questions Hale loved answering. About throughput, about margins, about expansion costs. He let Hale complain about miners as if they were weather, unpredictable, unavoidable, and ultimately beneath consideration. The upgrade is expensive, Hale admitted. Gold, silver, cobalt. It would take a full refit. But profitable, Silas said. Eventually. Silas tilted his head. What's eventually worth to you? Hale named a number. Silas didn't flinch. 80% of the upfront capital, Silas said slowly as if thinking it through. 20% of profits. 10 years. Hale's eyebrows rose. That's generous. I dislike managing operations, Silas said. I prefer returns. Hale chuckled. And the miners? Silas spread his hands. They'll sign. They'll have to. They met again the next day. Then again, a few hours later. Contracts were drafted, clauses added, removed, refined. Silas insisted on details. How upgrades would be financed, how profits would be distributed, how labor would be compensated. Hale smiled. Standard protection. Very, Silas agreed. He scrolled one line lower to the section defining the parties. The stakeholders, Silas continued, which after the transfer will be you and them. So if they fail to deliver the baseline ore volume, you keep the facility. Hale nodded. And if your financial guarantor ceases to fulfill his obligations, Silas said lightly, then they do. Hale waved a dismissive hand. I've already got your bank draft for the 80,000 credits. You're not going anywhere. Silas smiled and did not correct him. Hale thought Silas was simply being thorough. The miners thought Silas was dangerous. Silas met the miners privately in a maintenance alcove that smelled of coolant and old paint. They stood in a tight knot, arms crossed, faces hard. You're helping him buy us, one of them said. No, Silas replied calmly. I'm helping you own him. They didn't believe him, not at first. Silas showed them the contract. He walked them through it line by line. This clause, he said, tapping the screen, ties his processing facility to my continuous financial guarantorship. What does that mean? A Zebian miner asked. It means, Silas said gently, that me and my money are required to remain active participants in this contract for the duration of the agreement. And if you don't? Another miner asked. Silas smiled. Then the contract collapses, he will have to come up with the 100,000 credits, and when he can't, he defaults. And who gets the ore processing facility? Silas zoomed in on a paragraph Hale had insisted on adding himself. In the event that either party defaults, becomes insolvent, or is otherwise unable to fulfill its obligations under this agreement, the non-defaulting party shall retain immediate ownership of all assets involved in this agreement. The silence was absolute. You're going to leave, one miner said. Immediately after signing, Silas agreed. They stared at him. You'll bankrupt him, someone whispered. Briefly, Silas said. He'll recover. He's talented. And us? You'll own the facility and your mining rights, free and clear, Silas said. And you'll decide what you mine. The miners signed. Hale signed an hour later, beaming. By the time Hale realized that Carlton Drake's credit draft was as fake as his smile, Silas had left Perseus Station. It was too late. The contract failed elegantly. Funds froze. Creditors swarmed. Ownership transferred precisely as written. Silas watched the news feed from orbit, sipping his brandy. Well done, Hefon said quietly. Silas shrugged. He wanted to own the future. I just helped him get there faster. Silas had always found waiting to be the most revealing part of any operation. Not because it exposed mistakes, he rarely made those, but because it stripped away distractions. When there was nothing left to do but wait, patterns emerged. Habits, tells, truths people didn't realize they carried so loudly. The gentleman's grace drifted on station-keeping thrusters just outside Perseus traffic lanes, far enough to avoid notice, close enough to leave quickly if required. Silas sat at the narrow table by the viewport, brandy untouched, reviewing the manifest shell again. Perfect symmetry. That was the danger. Illegality hid well in chaos. Legitimacy, however, demanded balance. If one field was too clean, another had to be dirty. If a timestamp looked organic, a routing delay had to feel inconvenient rather than efficient. He adjusted a single metadata flag and smiled. You're enjoying this, Hefon observed from the doorway. Silas didn't look up. Enjoying is a strong word. Appreciating, perhaps. You appreciate danger. I appreciate solvable danger. Hefon approached, hands folded behind his back, eyes flicking briefly to the open manifest. Brock would not consider this solvable. Brock considers anything he cannot personally threaten unsolvable, Silas replied. It's a limitation. Hefon said nothing. He rarely disagreed aloud. When he did, Silas listened. The miner's situation will ripple, Hefon said eventually. Hale will contest. Of course he will. And Perseus arbitration will notice your absence. Silas finally glanced up. Which absence? Hefon inclined his head slightly. Exactly. Silas chuckled. You know me too well, my friend. He stood and moved to the viewport, watching traffic threads crawl across Perseus Station's sensor net like glowing veins. Somewhere inside that maze, the Frown registry clerks were filing stamps that would echo through core world systems long after anyone remembered why. Legitimacy was the most powerful fiction in the galaxy. People would fight wars over cargo that moved legally. They would ignore atrocities if the paperwork was clean. Silas had learned that lesson early, back when contracts had been weapons wielded against him rather than by him. He shook the thought away and checked the timer. Only a few hours until the Star Jumper crossed its first core world checkpoint. Too soon for comfort. Any word? Hefon asked. None, Silas said, which is exactly correct. The chameleon wouldn't rush. She understood pressure the way professionals did, by letting it build until it became useful. Silas returned to the table and finally lifted the brandy, letting it rest against his palm before sipping. He allowed himself that indulgence only when there was nothing left to manipulate directly. Do you ever regret it? Hifan asked quietly. Silas paused. Regret implies an alternative I would have accepted, he said. I left a world where lives were collateral and paperwork absolved the guilty. Now I live in a world where paperwork punishes them. That sounds like justification. Silas smiled faintly. It's perspective. The console chimed. Incoming message. Encrypted. Null space net signature masked but unmistakable. Silas didn't open it immediately. Timing, he murmured. Always impeccable. Hafan tilted his head. You planned this. Silas laughed. No, I merely planned for the possibility that someone competent would intervene. He opened the message. Insertion complete. 4 stamps verified. Core audit resistance high. I still own your IOU. Silas exhaled slowly. He knew the price of that IOU would be expensive the day she cashed it in. Well done, he said to the empty cabin. With 5 hours to spare, Silas forwarded the details to Brock, and Brock would of course forward them to Maggie aboard the Starjumper. Heffen approached again, offering a genuine cigar embossed with the sigil of an Earth-Mars plantation, and retrieved the secure comm kit. Where to now? Silas glanced once more at the stars beyond Perseus, then down at the null space net feed, scrolling quietly beside the manifest. Patterns. Always patterns. Set course for open drift, Silas said. I want some distance between us and the station, just in case. Silas smiled, eyes catching on a headline buried 3 layers deep. Shinra Universal Holdings acquires controlling interest in Halcyon, 4 agri-zones. Silas leaned back and lit his cigar. And after? Shinra Universal Holdings has, in the last 5 months, acquired 23% of Halcyon Fee's farmsteads, he said. I think we should pay them a visit and see how much legitimacy they can afford. Hafan smiled just slightly and turned toward the helm.